Welcome. Hello, everyone. This is so exciting. Thank you for being here. Welcome. There are lots of seats up front, and there are benches on the side, so nobody has to stand except the camera guy. Thank you, camera guy. Yes. Welcome. Come on in. Wonderful. Okay. My name is Jennifer De Leon, and I am an author, a professor, and a friend of Autumn's, an honored in conversation partner today. And both of us are thrilled that you are here. And just to explain the run of show tonight, I will introduce Autumn, and she will read a section of her book, her masterpiece, and then we'll be in conversation. I'll ask her a few questions, and we'll have just a wonderful time talking, and we'll leave some time for questions from the audience. So please start thinking of your questions. They can be comments as well, but it's going to fly by, so start thinking now. All right. Autumn Allen spent many years as an educator in non-traditional settings with children of all ages before she discovered she could study children's literature in graduate school. After earning degrees in children's literature and writing for children from Simmons University, she was awarded the Associates of the Boston Public Library Writer in Residence Fellowship, where she worked on her young adult novel, All You Have to Do, which debuts, well, we don't even need to say that anymore. It is published today, as of today. Yes. Yes. Wow, you got to change this bio with Penguin Young Readers. Her picture books, Step on Board, Sculpting a Memorial to Harriet Tubman, and Answered Prayers are forthcoming from Knopf Books for Young Readers. Autumn is a senior editor at Barefoot Books and a lecturer in children's literature at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where once upon a time she studied cultural psychology. Autumn grew up in Boston and lives in Massachusetts with her, I'll add, amazing family. So huge round of applause. We're going to just congratulate you. Yes. So much to ask you and discuss, but first, would you please read for us? Okay.
Can everyone hear me if I just stand and project? They won't.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, would you mind? Okay. All right, she's going to hold it for me because I can't multitask. Okay. Okay, so as many of you probably know, this story is a split story, so it alternates perspectives between a 1968 college campus with Kevin and a 1995 prep school campus in Massachusetts. So Kevin is at Columbia University after the assassination of Dr. King, and he and his fellow students are upset about many societal issues, including Columbia encroaching on Harlem. But this scene that I'm going to read is a flashback of Kevin's, his remembering his trip to the March on Washington in 1963. So in this scene, he's about 14 years old and he's experiencing the March on Washington. We passed the White House and finally arrived at the National Mall. There were buses from all over the country. Some had hand-painted signs representing churches, schools, youth groups, towns, or sponsor organizations. A hostess, another white woman with tidy dark brown hair, climbed into our bus, gripping a clipboard. She welcomed us and congratulated us for arriving. She spoke with our bus captain, who then turned to us and announced that we would meet back here at 7 o'clock sharp to depart. We stretched our bodies and filed off the bus. There were people everywhere, as far as the eye could see. Youth groups and choirs sang and danced. A group of young men in maroon jackets was stepping, clapping, and singing, while a ring of people watched. This may be the last time you march for freedom. This may be the last time, but I don't know. To the side, a group of young men shared cigarettes and compared their bus rides from California, Florida, and Boston. One man motioned with his cigarette as he talked. The agitation in his voice caught my attention. I got off the bus in Maryland to buy cigarettes, he said. They wouldn't serve me. When I got back on the bus, my bus captain gave me hell for having gone in the store. You believe that? We have to be organized. He imitated a high-pitched voice. This isn't about making a statement. If you're going to act on your own, you should take off your button because you're not representing the march when you do that. He sucked his teeth. I had half a mind to get off the bus and go home. White lady had some nerve, making a statement. Expecting to be served like a human being is making a statement? He took a deep drag of his cigarette and blew the smoke out with a grimace. His new friends shook their heads and made sounds of disapproval. Mom and Dad flanked us and steered us onto the grass around the Washington Monument, where volunteers handed out signs, flags, and programs with maps on the back. Dad chose a sign that said, "We demand equal rights now." People lined up and began to march. Row after row joined in singing, "We shall overcome," until the harmonies surrounded us. Dawn linked arms with me and Mom and sang her little heart out. The late August sun shone down steady. We waited below the stairs of the Lincoln Memorial while the speakers caught up with the crowd and ascended to their places near the podium. People exclaimed when they saw Diane Carroll, Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, and other stars. They were every bit as classy in real life as they were in the movies. Dawn stood on tiptoe, grabbing my arm. "It's really them," she squealed. All went still. Marian Anderson filled the air with her operatic voice, and the speakers began. Everyone remembers Dr. King's speech from that day, and that's the one they quote. But I remember a young man who spoke, John Lewis from SNCC. I had read about him in the papers, but I hadn't realized how young he was. Suddenly, SNCC was something I could soon join. I listened hungrily to his words. He invoked the hundreds and thousands of brothers who could not be there with us. People who were paid so little they could hardly afford to eat. Students who were jailed. He criticized the Civil Rights Bill. He criticized the Dixiecrats and the federal government, the party of Kennedy, for doing nothing to protect the people working for change. Unsatisfied with their inaction, he asked for a political party that would make it unnecessary to march on Washington. We were tired, he said, and he named what had worn us out. Being beaten by policemen, seeing our people locked up, being told to be patient. We want our freedom, he said, and we want it now. He told us to get involved in the Great Revolution, to get out and stay in the streets until true freedom came, until the revolution of 1776 was complete. I would remember his words more than any of the others. His was a demand, not a plea. He threw down a challenge to us all.
Love that. That was beautiful. So many questions are buzzing in my head. I just want to share a little bit about how Autumn and I know each other, right? So we met many years ago, and Autumn is one of those like loyal friends who is at every event that you do. And so I would always see her, and we'd see each other at conferences, and you were just very hungry, you were like wanting to learn so much about writing and about writing for young people in particular. And I respect that so much about you. And we're never done, right? We're always learning. So I, again, am thrilled to be here. So all you have to do is a literary masterpiece. And I feel like I'm so blessed because I got an early copy. And so I've been able to have this the last few months and read it and enjoy it. And I'm tempted, I don't want to spoil anything, right? So I'm going to have my questions be a little bit more general, but I really encourage everyone to pick up multiple copies, get one for yourself, get one for all the people in your lives. And we're so grateful that Frugal Bookstore is here. Leonard, thank you so much. And so, yes, we've known each other a while, and yet I don't fully know the origin story for this story. And I'm always curious for writers to pull back the curtain on like where this began.
So this is a question with many answers. And I guess when I was a student at Simmons,
I went to Simmons to study children's literature because I found a dearth of books that my children could relate to. So books about Black children, books about Muslims, with positive representation. And so I went there really intending, I'm gonna write those stories that make them feel good about who they are and, positive identity and all of that. But then what happens is that you have something inside of you that needs to come out. And so I wrote, one of my first pieces at Simmons that was, it was a story set in Islamic Spain, and it was historical, and it was, women doing smart, cool things, But then I just had this question that I needed an answer to. And that's how I came to this story. So the question was basically, how is it possible that for people, me, my siblings, so I have two brothers and one sister, and we just ended up so completely different. We went to the same schools, raised by the same parents, and our lives as adults just looked so completely different. And I really wanted to know how that happened. What were the experiences and the decision points and the personality traits and gender, how did all of these interact to make the outcome so different? And so I have some pictures in the slideshow that you all have probably seen. In the 1995 story, that's my brother back there, Khalil. And you should get his signature too. He wrote the lyrics in the book. And so, I started by interviewing him and asking, what was your experience of the schools we went to? I know what mine was. What was yours? So that you ended up on this, choosing a culture that didn't, these schools set out a path for you, and they say, if you get educated, you can be successful. And success is defined by a white picket fence, living in the suburbs, like this American dream, right? So we're all supposed to buy into that, and it's kind of assumed when we go to these prestigious schools. And so why does a person say, actually, no, that's not my definition of success, and that's not what I want, and I'm not gonna do what you're telling me I have to do in order to get that. So I just really wanted to understand how that happened. So I wrote and interviewed and talked and wrote and got feedback until I felt like I kind of understood.
Well, it's so clear that you do understand from the narratives, and there are two perspectives, as Autumn shared, right? We have Gibran and Kelvin, and I do want to say that when I first read early pages a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now, there's a program at the Associates of the Boston Public Library. They have a writer in residence program where a children's writer or a young adult writer who gets this fellowship, they get their own office in the library with their own key, and there's a fellowship, right? So there's a stipend, and they have the room and space to create and work on a book. And so I was on the judging panel on the committee that year, and there are blind submissions. So we narrow it down to 10, and then we go to 5, and then 4, and then 3, and then 1. And we had this on Zoom. It was 2020. And for me, this was the clear winner. And mind you, I had never read these pages, and they're anonymous. And when we decided that this was the winner, I thought, okay, so what's the author's reaction going to be? What's he going to say? Because I had just assumed, I will admit, I assumed that a man had written this because the perspectives were 2 points of view, and we'll talk about that, right? And I'm just like, oh, what's he going to say? And then the director of the program, who did have the biographical information, said, well, it's somebody named Autumn Allen. And I screamed into the computer because I'm like, but wait, oh my, that's Autumn. So then he said, do you want to call her and give her the news? And I'm like, yes, you think? So I actually didn't have your number, but I contacted Darren, your husband, who I know from old school, back in the day, working in Boston Public Schools. And by the way, you have not changed one bit. So unfair. And so I texted Darren. I'm like, what is Autumn's number? I need to talk to her. It's urgent. And so he gave me your number and we talked, and it was like, cue the balloons. It just was a wonderful moment to share. And you're just so deserving of this award. And you were able to finish the book. And now it's out in the world. So at the time, I remember there being 3 points of view, if I'm not mistaken. Or either way, can you tell us about your decision to structure the book this way and to have the dual points of view from different time periods? It's very ambitious, and I think it works wonderfully. But yeah, if you could tell us about that.
Yeah, in order to answer the question that I had to go back a generation, because the way that we were raised was dependent on the way that our mother was raised. And so, she brought us to these schools, but it wasn't like, yeah, just have fun, kids. It was like, look, you're here for a reason, and like, let this be clear. And so, in order to, because as kids, I think I probably am not the only one in my family who wasn't quite on board with my mom's sort of, I don't want to say distrust. Yeah, sort of just cautiousness, I'll say, about letting your guard down in, situations where you're a minority. And that's, as an adult now, and especially having done all this research, I see clearly, why that's not only makes sense, but is very smart. But as a kid, we're being raised in this colorblind era. Everyone's telling us the race doesn't matter. We don't even see color, And so we're hearing that and we're trying to believe it, even though we're feeling something different. And our mom is saying something different. And so we have all these sort of conflicting, messages. And so in order to understand the parenting choices and all of those sort of intergenerational transmissions, I had to go back a generation. So my very first draft was with Gibran's mom. It was sort of following her integrating a small town and then, being in college in the Black Power era. And then what happened was I got a research grant to go to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Cultures, which is at the New York Public Library. And I spent a month there just like consuming everything I possibly could. A lot of these articles and pictures are from there. And what I noticed there was that the way the young men were talking about the issues that they were facing in these schools sounded like you could have overlaid, my brother or anyone, who grew up in the 90s. So it was completely different situations on the face of it, but the feeling of it and the experience of it was so similar. It was just uncanny. And so I was watching a video, I think it was called Just a Brother, about middle-class Black people in like the 1960s and how, they're like, you can be as rich as you want, you're still just a brother. Like they're gonna treat you by the color of your skin. And that was the whole, that's how I chose that pivotal moment of Dr. King's assassination, because that was a real point where people said, you can be a saint, like you can be like the best human being in the world and you're still just Black to these people, right? And so, so that's how I needed the extra generation to sort of tell the kind of backstory of what was going on between the 1995 teen and their parent.
And there's a twist we won't talk about, right? But you have to read the book, but it's done so well. And I agree with you that the intergenerational narrative is part of any character's trajectory, right? Their character arc. We don't exist in a vacuum, right? At least I would say that for me, I always feel like my story is part of a larger story. It's the case for everyone. And to that tune, can you tell us about that scene that was so poignant about the father going to buy the house? Can you just tell us all about that? Because it relates to what you just shared.
Yeah, so is this still on? Okay. Well, I feel like I'll spoil it.
All right, okay.
It's the kind of scene you have to read it and experience it.
Well, you're good. She's like, you got to buy the book to find out. All right, you're already successful. You're already in a, yeah. Wherever books are sold. Good move, good move. All right, that's great. But it is true, you know, like the intergenerational, in general, in young adult fiction, not all the time, but in general, adults tend to be what we call off stage. Because for the point of view characters, which are young teenagers, yeah, the adults are around, but that's not like the main, that's not the center of their world. It's whatever drama is currently going on. But I love that here you do such a beautiful job with Gibran and his mom. I love his mom, and I could see her so vividly in the craftsmanship here is so beautiful because in the little details, like she comes home from work one day exhausted and she doesn't feel like making dinner, right? And she's like, oh, I think there's frozen meat in the freezer, hamburger. And so like he takes it and she's rubbing her feet. She took her shoes off from work and he's defrosting the meat and then he makes dinner. And I could just see them, the two of them together. And there are so many moments like that. So you chose to have the parent very much on stage. And I think, again, it works really well. But can you talk about the dynamic, if that was always the way, why you felt it was important to have the mom there?
Yeah, I mean, the book, again, is all about relationships, you know, and so I guess kind of selfishly, like I had to write my way into the book. And so I started it in third person because I wasn't confident that I would be able to get so internal into the characters. And so, but, you know, many revisions later, I felt like, I think my agent said, just try a scene in first person, you know, right? Those annoyingly on point suggestions. And so I did. And I think I had gotten through enough rewrites that I knew enough about the character. I was close enough to the character to be able to write it from his perspective. And, but the relationship still had to be there because to me, I thought the readers were never going to understand Gibran because, sorry, Khalil, I spent so many years not understanding my brother. And so I thought it's going to be so hard for them to understand and relate, you know, and so it took me writing so much to get there. And so I had all these characters, you know, coming in saying, well, what about, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And now you all can be on his side and be like, y'all, the mom and the sister, they're so annoying. But, you know, I had to write my way to get there, to be able to see it from that perspective. Because, you know, in the beginning, it was kind of writing from the outside, like, okay, what's going on with you? Why are you, you know, why can't you just get it together? You know? So I felt like, you know, I went a huge distance, you know, being able to go from what's going on to like, oh, wow, like, okay, I get it. And that's brave. And I, you know, I much respect, you know.
That empathy, right? Like writing the character made you maybe closer. And I kind of feel like we're in a family therapy situation right now in the best way. But that's what writing does. That's what fiction does. And sometimes, you know, people say like when you write fiction, it's truer than nonfiction, right? It has more emotional truth. And I definitely agree with that. And you talked a little bit about, or I will say too, that about how you were saying, how could the siblings come out like differently? My grandmother always used to say that children are like, you know, dedos in Spanish, right? But fingers on your hand, and that each one is different, right? And it's the same hand and the same parents, like you said, but each one is just very different. And so I think it's all good. But I will say that I was so impressed with the research or the information in this book, right? I think part of why authors write young adult fiction is, you know, to write entertaining novels and books and stories, but also I don't know if you agree with this, there's a kind of, you want to offer something to the next generation, right? And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, like what you hope young readers gain from this novel, older readers too, but especially young readers.
Well, actually, one of my favorite things is hearing older readers react to it, because I was able to get
an alum of Columbia who was at the sit-ins to read the book. And I was so nervous because if he says, no, this is not what it was like, or if, if he disapproves in any way, how am I gonna go forward and be like, well, I'm publishing it anyway, right? So, so I was like, please like it, please like it. So it was amazing. We had so many long conversations and he just imparted so much. I mean, he was also a professor after, so he had a lot of knowledge and experience. And so that was just amazing. But it was, so he stayed up all night to finish it. And I was like, what? That's amazing. Like, you were there and yet you wanted to finish the story. And I think my mother-in-law too said she was on the edge of her seat. She knew what was going to happen because she had sit-ins at her school too, but she wanted to see what's going to happen. So that's some of the best feedback is from people who kind of experienced it and still got into the story. But now I forgot the question.
The young people, yeah.
Oh, what do I want young people to get from it? Yeah, so when I was talking to Dr. Sales, who's the alum from Columbia, I just felt like I was sitting at the feet of a fountain of wisdom, he just, his memories, him sharing about being there, being in the buildings and being young and having these ideals and these goals. But now, he's a grandparent and he's thank goodness for young people, because looking back now, that was stupid. We could have gotten killed, but you need people to take those risks, And so, but my feeling, what I hope that young people can get reading the book is the feeling that I had sitting with him and just hearing this wisdom and being you're amazing. What you all have done to blaze a trail so that we could have it easier, and there's still so much more, to do, so much more work to do, but just to have this idea of all of this that's come just so that I can do what I'm doing today, So I hope that young people can read it and say, whoa, they went through a lot, and okay, I'm grateful and I'm gonna take it further, take it another step.
Ooh, that's so good. So good. Oh man, yeah. In the way the book is like a light, a torch, right, to continue on, and that's wonderful. I just have another question, and then I hope we can open it up, and you all have some questions to ask Autumn. I'm thinking about what everything you said, and just how having an idea for a book, or you mentioned the question, I love that, right? It was a question that was growing and kind of gnawing, right? It was stuck in your craw and you were just what is this? How that eventually comes to holding this book in your hand, right? So I had the same fellowship that Autumn had at the Boston Public Library, and it was a game changer for me, both because of the space and time to write, but the validation that strangers thought that my story could be a book. So I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about your time at the library, but even your research and just kind of a little bit more of as far as your process to get us here tonight.
So this is a difficult question, and I warned those of you who are on Facebook, I might get emotional tonight. This is that moment. So the phone call, when you called me, I remember it vividly because I was coming from my mom's house and she was in hospice care. And so Darren's texting me saying, Jen De Leon is trying to get in touch with you. And I'm like, I don't care. It can't be that urgent, and so finally, we talked, and but I just felt it was my third time applying, right? And I felt why now? Why am I getting this now? My mom is dying, and now I have to go write a book. Who cares? It was just a really difficult moment to be yay, this thing I've been working on for, now it's my time. I just felt I don't want to do anything, and so it took me a few days, but I got to tell her before she passed away.
And so I sat with her and I told her that I was doing the thing that she always told us to do, which was do what you love to do so much that you would do it for free, and find a way to have someone to pay you to do it. And that was like her life advice. And it was so like just a guiding light. And so, you know, I had this opportunity. And so I was able to tell her, you know, okay, I have this, you know, this thing that, you know, I've been trying to get, and they're going to pay me to sit and write my book in a library. And the smile on her face, which I hadn't seen in weeks, you know, because she's, you know, just deteriorating. Like, it was just like, okay, all right, I have to do this, you know. So that was the motivation part. Sorry, I hope someone brought tissues. So I just, you know, and then also just looking back at, you know, her legacy that she left, you know, that she left a mark. It was like, okay, she did what she came to do, and I have to also, you know, contribute and do something. And so at that point, I had already been through, I think I was on my second draft. And so I spent that year of the fellowship just revising and trying to put it all together, because I had just words, just kind of like scenes and ideas, and, you know, and it didn't really fit together. I didn't really know how the characters connected and all of that. So I love hearing people say that the two storylines come together well, because I worked really hard on that. That was part of what I needed to do, was to sit down and figure out, almost like a math problem or a puzzle, like, how is this gonna, you know, I know they're parallel, I can see it, but like, how do I make it matter, you know? And so that's what I spent a lot of the year doing, was just kind of putting charts of scenes up on the wall. I think all that year, you know, when people were Zooming me, they're like, what's that chart of Post-its on the wall? It was all the scenes and moving them around and figuring out how to order them so that each character's story made sense, because each character has their present story and their backstory, you know, in flashbacks. And so it was a lot of figuring and, you know, structure, which Adam helps me with. Yeah, so that's what that year looked like.
So great. That's the trick, right? It sounds perfectly normal. Like, you have all these scenes and you don't know how they connect, characters, what are you doing there? And that's the work, is figuring it out, right? But I thank you for sharing that story about your mom. And just hearing that makes me feel like the timing was just right, you know? So who would like to ask a question? I love it, ready to go. Okay, here, we'll pass the mic to you.
Oh, thank you. In the aspect that artists tend to fall in love with their art object in order to really empathize with their subject and create a very vivid and strong character. Between the first, second, and third drafts in your writing process, is it very dispassionate, or do you have a lot of trouble cutting off the warts off of your characters? Or do you actually add more instead of detracting to clarify? And how do you feel as you leave one aspect of it in one draft to the other? Is there any longing, nostalgia, or is it just a wrap? You're so glad because you changed and sculpted some new lives, or whatever you did in your, just between the first and last drafts.
I know, thank you. So that's such an interesting question. I actually have a draft of the book that is my draft. It's not the published draft, it's my favorite draft. And when readers read it, you know, I had so many people read and give feedback, and too many of them said, this doesn't quite work for me as a reader. And I disagreed. And so I kind of fussed and, you know, kind of went and got second and third and fifth opinions, but it was pretty much, most people felt like that particular narrative style wasn't coming together for them. So I said, okay, fine. I will write a version for you readers and I'll keep my version in the drawer, and that's where it stays. And so I do get precious about, certain things I've done. But there's that point when I start, I'm writing for me, and I'm most passionate in writing when I'm trying to figure out a question, like I said. But through drafts and many, many drafts, I end up writing for the reader. And so, if there are things I have to cut because it's important to me, but it's not helping the story, that's all in the last drafts. So does that answer the question?
Questions and thoughts, yeah. And we can't forget, you're going to take a selfie with the audience.
Assalamu alaikum, Autumn. The book seems amazing. I can't wait to read it. I just wanted to ask, this book is about a Black boy and a Black experience. Did your faith as a Muslim interacted with the character? Did it influence the way you're writing, or was it purely the Black experience, of growing up?
Thank you. That's a good question, because, I have so much support from the Muslim community for, publishing this book and everything, and it's awesome. And sometimes I'm worried that people who are Muslim but not Black are going to read it and be like, but I thought this was going to be about us, So I was really pleased when a prominent reviewer who is Muslim but not Black read the book and loved it. Like, I was prepared. I was like, she's gonna hate it. Like, it's not relevant to her, but she loved it. She's like, I learned so much, it's so it expanded my mind, deepened my understanding. And I was just like, wow, this is what I want. We need to, learn from all experiences, and so to me, race is not to me, in general, it's fact, race is a social justice issue, right? And so, Muslims are supposed to be leaders in, speaking out against oppression. And so in that sense, that's how my faith was just about what is fair and what is right and what's really happening, seeing what's happening in these institutions, how it's affecting people, and how it's, really breaking people apart, and trying to articulate that, because I have the opportunity to. So that's, just seeing my role and my ability to do that as, doing my duty as a Muslim. And I did have some cameos of Muslim characters.
Nice. I think we'll do one or two more, and then Autumn's going to continue signing. So we go here. My Oprah moment here.
How are you? Hello, Autumn. Congratulations. So for folks who don't know, Autumn and I met in August of 19 when we were both working on manuscripts. And this year, both of our books came out. So I'm here to absolutely celebrate Autumn and this major accomplishment, and wondering if you could share with the audience, it's quite a journey as an author. It's a windy, twisty, never linear kind of journey. And I'm wondering if you can share this very early part of your journey. What's been the most shocking part of getting this book into the world?
Great question. Suspense builds. Okay.
You had to come with the hard questions. Let's see. I think honestly, it's been shocking for me how smoothly things have gone. And I think, that partly goes back to what I talked about in terms of my mom, and just feeling like, oh, well, I gave it a try, I'm giving up. To me, it just felt like God was like,
No, you're not. Like, I'm laying out all of this for you. Just do this, and then this, and the opportunities just like after the Boston Public Library came the Schomburg. After, I got my agent. Everything just came together really smoothly. It wasn't easy, but with the hard work, it was smooth. And so, just seeing that I never got that point again where it was like, okay, I'll give up now. I'll just go back and, not do this anymore. It was just like, no, you have to do it. It's laid out, and just take the next step and the next step and the next step. So.
Thank you. So it was all you had to do. Couldn't resist. All right, I think that's a great note to end on. I know, I'm a teacher. Okay, so we have a few more minutes, I guess, and let's do a picture because we always forget the picture. So why don't you stand there, and I'll take it. Maybe you hold a book.
So I'm facing.
Yeah, hold a book. All right, because this is like the picture you're gonna hopefully have forever, remember forever. Okay, everybody, I'm doing 0.5, so you're all in here. Okay. Okay, amazing. If you have your book, hold it up. If you have your book, hold it up. Okay, those are for your mom. All right, so you tell me, I don't know how we're doing on timing. Yeah, okay, I think we'll end here, but thank you all so much.
Should I do it? I'll just do a little. Okay. Okay. Is this on? Can you hear me? Hello? Oh. It's on? Hello? It's on? Okay. If you can hear me, I'm sorry. So I wrote a little speech that I wanted to give tonight, but I can't find my phone, and that's where my speech is. So I'm sorry, but I'm just going to try and remember the main points. Mainly, I wanted to say that I am so, looking out at everyone here is just amazing. I'm so grateful to all of you for supporting me through this journey from beginning to now and on. And I just want to say that this story is all of ours. It wouldn't exist if it weren't for the resilience of, the people who were brought here against their will and did the best they could with what they had. And so I am grateful to our ancestors and to our elders for paving that path and making it so that we could survive and thrive. And to the youth, I want to say you are everything. You are your ancestors' wildest dreams. You are amazing. The world is in your hands, and I hope that you can take it and run and just do amazing things. So that's the main thing. I'm sorry, I forgot. I couldn't find my phone. If I find it, I'll take the mic again and give my real speech. Thank you so much. I've also been reminded to thank my family by name. So Darren, you're the best. Darren kept me smiling through this whole journey, and he alternated in his style of encouragement. So sometimes when I said, "Is my book any good? Should I keep writing?" He'd say, "Of course." And other times he'd say, "No, you should just quit." And that was really helpful, levity. So thank you. Khalil, for sharing everything, your stories, and just being so generous. You're amazing. Thank you. And my cousin Karen is here. Karen, can you wave? She saved the book by doing the sketches at the very last minute with very little time, and it turned out amazing. Thank you so much. And Jenna, who's my photographer, and Sakina, where's Sakina? Sakina, who does my Instagram posts. And Yusra, who keeps me humble. And I won't go into details about that. Thank you all so much for being here. I love you all. And Shonda. Oh my gosh, what? And Shonda. Obviously. Okay. The only reason I forgot that is because Shonda is me and I am Shonda. So we're one and the same. You're clapping for me, you're clapping for her already. So thank you.